basically what we are going to showcase here today and have conversations with you on is implemented by an interesting cocktail of entities. You have the African Union Commission, you have the GIZ at the African Union, you have Ushahidi, and you have the CTIN. So the biggest purpose for our convening here today is, one, highlight the contribution of the continent's young people towards the continent's development through civic tech innovation, but also to create a space for you guys to make contribution towards this amazing initiative. So without much ado, I'll hand over to Rhoda so that we get to know who is in the room. A lot of you guys already look like you want to go home and sleep. It's a bit late. So Rhoda is going to take us through a small exercise so we get to know who is here.
Thanks, Mohammed. So because technology fails, it has failed. But we are still going to try this exercise. We basically want to know you. So we'd ask all of you to please log into menti.com and fill in the code. Where is the code? It is not on that screen. The code is 534. Let me wait for everybody to get onto menti.com. Are we there? Menti.com, and the code is 5354. Are we good? 5354 and then 0516. Five three five four 0516. 0516. Sorry, the original laptop which was supposed to be used failed to connect. I repeat the number again. 5354 0516. Okay. Okay. It's not going to pop up there. However, on my laptop, so I will stand up. We already have 3 people here who are in the civil society. Let me walk around as if I'm selling this MacBook Pro. Over here, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. The code. The code. 53. You log into menti.com. MENTI. On the search, Google search. Yes, so menti.com. So let's give a few of our colleagues a bit, like 30 seconds so that we can all log in. 5354 0516. The code 5354. And then 54 0516. D'accord? See, I know a few French words. 5354 0516. Are we good? Okay. Okay. Are we okay? Oui. So select which category you are in. The number? 53. No problem, no problem. 53. 54. 05. 16. Oh, it is. Oh, thank God. I was so stressed. Have we all selected something? Okay, so majority of us here are from the civil society. Nobody from media, private sector, policymakers. I will look for you, funder, and hunt you down right after this. And there's no academia. Is there anybody who we have missed out, who hasn't found anywhere that they fall here? We are all here. All right. Okay. It was important for us to understand who's in the room so that even as we continue on with the discussion, then we know how to engage you accordingly. Great. Okay, that took a bit of time, but it was good for us to understand. Thank you. I'll hand it over back to Mo.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. This is exciting. We have a lot of civil society in the room. And maybe just before we move on, who has ever heard about the AU Civic Tech Fund? Have you ever heard about the AU Civic Tech Fund? Only one person in the room. Wow. Okay. Okay, this side knows we are going to have a bit of explaining to do. So like you already know, Africa has a burgeoning youth population, which is both an asset and a liability. Asset, if we tap into it. Liability, if we don't do anything about it. Then we shall have a lot of young and energetic people at our hands that are not productive. And as a result, Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063 sets the continent along a path that is citizen-centered, especially with a focus on the continent's young people and its women. So Agenda 2063, especially Aspiration 6, puts the continent's young people at the heart of the continent's development, both as beneficiaries, but also as active contributors. Are we together, or am I moving so fast? So we have a situation of very many young people at our hands, and Agenda 2063 ensures that these young people are actively involved in the continent's development as beneficiaries and contributors. And as a result of that citizen-centric spirit, youth-centric spirit, the African Union Commission aspires to engage and involve the continent's young people in the continent's development. We have something called, for example, 1 Million Next Level. Who has ever heard about 1 Million Next Level initiative? You've heard about it. So the 1 Million Next Level initiative aspires to reach at least 300 million young people on the continent with opportunities in education, entrepreneurship, engagement, health, and well-being, as well as education. Additionally, we have, what should I call it? The digital transformation strategy for the continent. And this is, I would say, the digital transformation wing of Agenda 2063. It aspires to achieve Agenda 2063, and this coupled with a whole lot of other youth-centric initiatives and projects, the African Union Commission seeks to engage the continent's young people. So the AU Civic Tech Fund settles comfortably in that context, in that background, and so is going to tell you a bit more what exactly it is, how we pursue it, and then we shall have conversations on that basis. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mohammed. Just before we get into exactly what the African Union Civic Tech Fund is, I just wanted to highlight that we're just going to discuss a bit about the background, but we will also delve into a bit of the ecosystem research and the findings that we have been working on. But Rhoda will also tell us about the capacity building elements of the project, and then we'll also have a bit of a discussion. So in terms of the background of the AUCTF, essentially, as Mohammed has described it, this comes under the banner of the Agenda 2063 policy that the African Union has put in place. And the goal is essentially for us to foster positive societal change through these civic technologies. Maybe I can go back a bit and describe a little bit about what civic tech actually is, because this is the foundation of what the fund is trying to support. So we view civic technology as those technologies that are specifically looking at connecting people with their governments, whether these are civic engagement platforms or public participation platforms or websites and apps and things like that. But also it's technologies that are enhancing the accountability and transparency of the public sector. So people often don't know what's happening in government, and these technologies are those that can provide access to critical information that can allow people to better engage with their governments. But we are also seeing a rise in civic technologies that are looking to enhance access to services, which is a big developmental challenge that we are facing in various countries across the continent. So what we are developing through the AUCTF is modeling and demonstrating these models of citizen participation, and also looking at supporting these initiatives. So in terms of the makeup of the project, as Mohammed has said, it's the GIZ African Union, as well as Ushahidi, which is our implementing partner, as well as the Civic Tech Innovation Network. And the basis of this project is that we are funding 15 grantees who are working in the area of civic tech across the continent. And the basis of this is not only to provide this funding support and mechanism, but through Ushahidi, our implementing partner, we also have an important aspect of providing capacity building support, because oftentimes it's not just about the funding, but there are other developmental, project management, advocacy elements around this. So I've shared that the one element is about funding, and the other aspect of the project is looking at the capacity building element. But lastly, and very importantly, we are looking to enhance the ecosystem of civic tech. And what this means is we are working on various research projects that seek to enhance the information that's available in the ecosystem and trying to understand what are exactly the issues and where civic tech is growing, what are the different trends around civic tech across the continent. And other aspects in terms of building the ecosystem is also ensuring that the grantees are equipped with information and know-how and access to platforms and regional organizations such as the GIZ African Union to be able to push some of the advocacy issues that they may be facing in the various regions that they are coming from. So there's those three tenets around the funding, the capacity building, but also the ecosystem building elements where we want to advance their ability to advocate for themselves and the issues that they are facing in the various regions that they are coming from. And just in terms of the work that we have done already, so earlier this year we launched the call for applications, and what was really important for us was to ensure that at least the project is bilingual, because we want to ensure that it's as inclusive and also has the reach that we want to achieve. So we received about 348 applications from 38 different African countries, which is a huge achievement for us because we also noticed that civic tech is not homogeneous across the continent, but there are other regions that are developing faster than others, and others are just emerging in the space of civic technologies. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see a graph that's just indicating the countries that we have identified as having a high number of civic tech projects down to those where it's still starting out. And this was important for us to reflect upon when we look at where the applications we received are coming from. And this became very important for how we begin to plan around the project, but also looking at our ability to really have an impact in all of the regions and ensure that there's at least representation on as part of the grantees who are getting the fund to ensure that they have access and support to the resources that we are providing through the fund. So this is just another breakdown in terms of the applications that we received per country. And this is very important data for us to look at, especially because we are a network of civic tech across the continent, and to know where the gaps are. Why are there not enough applications that we're receiving from Central Africa? Why is there dominance in West and Southern Africa, for example? So those are the things that are important for us to be tracking, because this is also, like Mohammed has explained before, it's a long-term journey that we are on, and we want to ensure that access to such a fund is as inclusive as possible, but also that we are supporting to scale the existing initiatives that were there. So a big part of the project, which I think Rhoda will speak to a little bit later, is ensuring that we at least have the capacity or to attract the right kind of innovators who are already in the space, who are already working on projects that are impacting the various communities and different sectors of civic tech. So we wanted to ensure that we have access to this kind of data to inform our future planning for the project going forward.
Thank you so much, Siwe. Like you saw from those numbers at the Women, Gender and Youth Directorate of the African Union Commission, we pursue regional balance as well as gender parity. So we try to ensure that we have representation from across the continent with the applications we receive, but we also ensure that women are actively involved. But above all, we ensure that these ideas lift the most marginalized voices, the voices of women, young people, persons with disabilities, and we want to ensure that impact is actually felt at the lowest level of our continent. Just before I go to the next question, you people still look like you want to sleep, and I want to involve the sign language interpreter to teach us 1 or 2 signs. So get ready to learn 1 or 2 signs. Huh? So teach them how to say, I want water. I want water. Please try that. Water. Okay. Okay, that is 1 sign. The second sign. Let's try that. Okay, I know they are not going to serve dinner, but I just wanted us to learn a little sign language. So please, let's go to the next bit, and that is a question I have for you, Asmerit. Why is civic tech innovation in Africa important from a GIZ perspective? Why would GIZ want to partner with the African Union and Ushahidi and CTIN to ensure the success of this?
Okay, so I think first of all, to make it a bit more easier and understandable, how these German development cooperation projects come to be, you always have 2 partners. In our case, you have the German government and the African Union. Our project is a governance project, so you always have a sector that you focus on. And basically, when it comes to our outputs, the main thing that they're interested in is increased citizen engagement, which also a big factor for Germany is to increase democracy promotion. When it comes to civic tech in general, they're basically mirroring these agendas or interests because these organizations or African organizations on the ground, you always look at what is already going on, what is happening. We can see that these organizations are trying to limit the gap between the citizens and their own governments by holding them accountable or creating more citizen engagement to influence policy. When it comes to the AU, Mo already mentioned Agenda 2063 and Aspiration 6, which mirrors this as well, which basically says we want to include citizens on the outcomes of these development goals. So it's basically for Germany, the interest in democracy promotion, which all of these citizen tech organizations do on the ground, basically most of them have this, and also for the AU, the alignment on Agenda 2063, which mirrors this. You can go ahead with.
Thank you. We are trying to promote our intimate session, so that is why Mohammed is bringing the rest of our colleagues at the back to come to the front before we continue. Thank you, Asmeret. She's also a funder. Feel free to disturb her after this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, one sign. That gentleman over there, I'm going to work a lot with you, so keep your eyes on me. Teach us one more sign. How do you, okay. Teach us one sign. How do you clap in sign language? Oh, so that's the same everywhere. I thought it was only Ugandan and Kenyan. Okay, thank you so much, Asmeret. And I think you might have heard from Siwe already that we don't just provide money for these initiatives, but we also strengthen capacities because of the African Union Commission, we believe in sustainability, and we are going to engage you later on how we can make this even more sustainable. So I'll hand over to Rhoda from Ushahidi to take us through the capacity building elements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mo. So as Ushahidi, having been in existence for over 16 years, our role really in this program is to achieve with them, is to show them the mistakes that we have learned over the past 16 years so that they can avoid those mistakes and be able to grow and scale essentially with the support also from CITIN and NGIZ and the African Union. That's a picture of the 15 grantees that we selected. I will not talk about all of them, but I'll give a few examples. Right at the top there, we have Idarati from Tunisia. They are gathering open data, government open data, and helping that, analyzing that, and sharing that with journalists so that they can be able to provide more evidence-based journalism in that public data. Can go to the west there. We have the Restored Heart Foundation from Education Systems. They have a project called the Teacher Bank where they are matching those who have graduated from education in the university and matching them to schools that lack teachers, which is it's a dear project to me because my mom is a teacher, so anything concerning education for me is a big deal and should be a big deal to all of us because really education is what paves the way for growth in every area of our lives. In East Africa, we have Isheria Ventures from Kenya, where I'm from. They are breaking down legal, laws, basically. So providing that legal aid and ensuring that down to the grassroots level, the community member is able to understand the laws and policies that concern them. They're able to understand their civic rights, their civic duties. And I think laws for all of us really not for all of us, most of us, okay, let me speak for myself. They can be quite boring or there's so much jargon that it tends to just pass over your head. But this civic tech organization is helping to break down this legal jargonese in a way that you, myself, everybody at the grassroots level can be able to understand and be able to stand up for their rights and also be a part of decision making right at the grassroots level. And so, yeah, these are some of them, and they are ranging from climate action to countering gender-based violence, all the way to tracking political promises. So we have a spectrum of very promising civic tech innovators in Africa who we are really excited to work with and to show the world, show Africa how they can be able to take, ensure that we are engaging Africans with our governments. Okay, so when it comes to hosting such a civic tech innovation program, there are some best practices that we have come to lean on or to use. This is the second iteration of this program that we are hosting under the GIZ African Union. In terms of selection, it wasn't just Siwe, myself, Asmeret, and Mohammed sitting down in a room and throwing names up in the air and picking grantees that we like. It was a very rigorous selection. As Siwe said, we received applications from 38 countries. Therefore, in addition to the project team, we had experts in the civic tech spectrum from across the continent who were then able to review all these applications and get them down to the 15 that we finally chose. In terms of the grantees, the 15 grantees that we looked at, we're looking at the innovation potential. It's civic tech. So that tech part is a very huge component in what we are seeking in terms of the grantees. What sort of innovation do you have? In this day and age, technology is moving so fast. Today is AI, tomorrow is ML, next week will be QZ, all these alphabetical terms which are just flying. I'm not a techie, so a lot of these terms fly over my head. So we need innovations that are up to date, that are working in what's happening currently in the world, and that's what we looked for. As another thing is scalability and sustainability. Not just looking at the technology itself being sexy, for example. It has to have meaning, it has to have purpose, it has to be able to connect the citizen to the government, as Siwe had mentioned, so that it's not just technology which has been created for the sake of itself. Because we are wanting to engage citizens and governments, it has to be able, we need to be able to see the potential of it scaling regional-wide, national-wide, continental-wide even. And find alignment with the AU, because we want to help these grantees see that their work, as much as it is at a programmatic level, it also has a policy influence. So how can we help them think through how their programmatic work affects policy at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, and the continental level. And this is why the AU is quite important, to help the grantees connect their work at a macro level, at a micro level, to the policy level at a macro level. And finally, also, as Siwe also mentioned, in terms of inclusivity, ensuring that we are having women, youth, and other minority groups to also be part of the grantee selection. So we tried to ensure that there's a balance, regional balance. We looked at the innovation potential, the scalability, and how their work aligns with the AU Agenda 2063. In terms of financial support, yes, it's not just enough to give them money, so to speak, or just select them for this program. In addition to giving them money, we are ensuring that we are working with them and supporting them to then effectively use this money, whether it is for testing, whether it is for scaling, and we are not here to dictate to them how they should use that money. Our role is to provide them with a grant, provide them with the space for them to use it however they feel best to enable them to reach the next level. And again, as I'd mentioned before, as we were selecting them, it was extremely transparent and an open selection process with multi-stakeholders in the civic tech space in Africa. And finally, when it comes to technical support, which is where we come in as Ushahidi, we did not come to say this is what you need training on. We asked them, what is what are your needs? We took them through a SWOT needs analysis assessment, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities and threats. Strengths because they too have something to teach us. A lot of them have already started using, for example, AI or ML. Us as Ushahidi is when we're just starting to use it 16 years later. So they too can teach us as older organizations in the space something. So we are harnessing their strengths. They can be able to, for peer-to-peer learning. And then in terms of their weaknesses, is it digital skills that they need training in? What are the threats that are preventing them from scaling? Is it sustainability? Is it funding? Is it partnerships? So we looked at their needs, and through this, we were able to get common threads through the assessment that we received, and package this into master classes, package this into key modules, which they take every month. They have 2 classes where there's a key module or and a master class. So we look at it like sort of a cake. So the key module is the essence of the cake, while the master class is sort of the icing of the cake. So we take them through 2 trainings every month, and then we also have a number of peer-to-peer learnings whereby we see what have they said that they're good at. Is it animation? Is it leveraging commercial alternatives? Because we have 2 grantees that are for profit. So what can they teach the non-profit organizations in terms of creating sustainability models for growth and scale? And they're also participating at CITIF, which I shall ask Civic to talk about, as it's being hosted by Citi next month. We are exposing them to avenues of advocacy, so that it's not just us who know about them, but we want to ensure that we let Africa know about what the work they're doing, and I'll let Civic talk briefly about that.
I'll be brief. So I mentioned earlier that CTIN is a community of practice. So we have our annual conference coming up from the 28th to the 31st of October in Johannesburg, where we convene this community of practice of researchers, policymakers, innovators, journalists, anyone who's interested really in leveraging the nexus between technology and civic activism. So our grantees will be in attendance there, and they'll get to engage with this wider community from across the continent.
Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause for Rhoda. That was some interesting stuff. Now, just to make sure we understand what these people are saying, I hate lectures. I prefer conversations. So that's why we had to metamorphose from a panel to this kind of setup. So just make sure we all know what has already been said. They've told us what it is, how it works, who is involved. So I'm going to randomly select 3 people. 3 people. And each of you is going to tell us what you think the impact of such an initiative would be for the continent's young people and the continent at large. So, Yohanlaka, I know you. So, Moses, you. So, Moses, I'm starting with you. What do you think the impact of such an initiative would be on the continent's young people, its people and development?
I think the impact is, I would see it in terms of sustaining these innovative, ideas or solutions that they have proposed to you. The issue is, how do you ensure that what they are doing generate impact, great impact, benefits, more people in more, long-term goal. So for me, that would be the end point. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Moses. Thank you very much. My name is Wevin, and I'm the founder of Civic. So this was very exciting to listen to. I think the impact is profound in the ways in which we can get a lot of young people to engage in civic initiatives. I just had a reflection around the funding. So I was sitting here and thinking, wow, I'll apply for that fund. Oh, the grantee is already there. So then So I think it's a challenge that many Civitech maybe founders can talk about the funding. Even when the tech is exciting, it's very difficult to sell Civitech to investors and founders. So I guess I'm throwing it back to you as a reflection around how do we create more streams of revenue that are sustainable, just like, you know, in the Civitech space. Thinking of how we now have impact bonds, peace bonds. So how do we make Civitech more exciting for investors and the private sector to be able to invest? Because that's where I think the impact can multiply and scale. And finally, how do we also leverage young people's changing priorities in civic tech? Today they care about climate, tomorrow they care about governance, but citizen engagement and civic engagement remains standard. So I'm thinking about the underlying or the fundamental principles around civic engagement in itself and how you can incorporate it in your initiative. Thank you.
Wow. Everyone, a round of applause, please. We shall have to get back to some of those issues because I think there's a lot of interesting responses.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yvonne, and I'm excited to be here. I am the regional rep for CTIN West Africa. My question would be, we did a research last year on emerging challenges of civic technology in West Africa. And two things were very, very outstanding for us was the duplication of tools all around the region and the continent. If somebody is doing something here, everybody's working in silos. How are you ensuring that tools are not being duplicated? How do you ensure that people come together and synergize around building a tool that can work for different communities at the same time rather than duplicating efforts? And also, how do you ensure usability? Because sometimes we're excited about a tool that has just been developed, but over time, it becomes very inaccessible. Citizens don't know about it, so they don't even use the tool. For instance, accountability tools are everywhere, but not everybody is using it. And majority of the people who we had in mind developing these tools do not even know these tools exist. How do we ensure that there is usability for these tools that are being developed? Because these were some of the issues we found out during our research in West Africa.
Okay, let's do like a huge round of applause. You guys look like you want to go home already. We shall go in about 30 minutes. So I'm also going to open up the floor again for a round of questions. But at this point, I just want to engage us with regards to impact. I mean, for us at the African Union, it's important that the entire life cycle of this initiative is an impactful process in itself before we even look at the long term. Because I mean, if you identify 14 young people, entities on the continent, support them with resources, support them with capacities, and also see them grow their initiatives. For us, we want to ensure that the life cycle of the initiative itself is an impact besides the output or the outcome of these innovations. So that is the first stage. But the second stage, you talked about a lot of issues related to sustainability. And I wanted to say that besides the capacity building and the network building, we also have deliberate I would call them matchmaking attempts between our beneficiaries and the wider ecosystem. For example, so we can tell you a little bit about what we shall have at the CTIF, a pitching session, which could be beneficial for these young people to get more funders, partners for their initiatives so they could, grow as opposed to dying at the end of the initiative. Please tell her a little bit more about the pitching session.
Thanks, Mo. So you're very accurate in terms of saying that funding is a very huge challenge in the space. So what we are wanting to do is create a space where funders and the grantees can have generative conversations, because oftentimes you find that it's people who are looking for funding who are just talking to the funders, and we never get to hear from the funders what they are looking for, why applications normally get rejected, or just in general feedback and insights in terms of what the ecosystem is needing and how your project can be leveraged to solve a particular problem. So that's the premise of this pitching session that we want to host. That's happening at the conference, where we'll have a diverse group of organizations in attendance. But just quickly, if you allow me, Mohammed, very interesting question that you were speaking about, Yvonne, in terms of how do we ensure that we're not duplicating efforts? Because part of what we are trying to do with this project as well is to grow the community and the ecosystem around civic tech. So firstly, is for people to understand who is in the ecosystem. So as CTIN, as you'll know, we are mapping about 240 civic tech organizations from across the continent, but oftentimes people don't really know where they are, how can I connect with another civic tech organization. So it's part of the research efforts that maybe we can discuss a bit later, but part of the research is also ensuring that this information is readily available so that we can enable this networking amongst the civic tech innovators themselves, so that they can leverage their knowledge and information, but also to teach each other and share this information, because there's oftentimes very important and transformative technologies that are being developed, but none of the connections are being made in terms of how we can better learn from each other and partner across the continent.
Wow, thank you so much, Siwe. We forgot our applause. That is also in part meant to keep us awake. So I'll toss the same question to Asmerit from the GIZ. From a funder's perspective, what would you consider the measure of success or impact for such a civic tech initiative?
Okay, so actually most of it has already been discussed. So we can look at it in two factors. Of course, we want to bridge the gap between this huge multilateral institution that is the African Union and then the citizens. And the biggest group of citizens that we have are young people. For the AU, this is everyone under 35, so it's the huge majority of the continent. And we do not want to focus only on regular citizen engagement, which often excludes certain groups of people like young people, women, marginalized groups, and minorities. So when we look at these 15 organizations that we chose, these are already doing the work of including these four groups that are often not included. So basically, through the Civic Tech Fund, the measure of success is then how much we actually included these groups of citizens in policy initiatives, or holding the government accountable, whatever the sector may be. Adding on to that, of course, we have our own monitoring and evaluation trackings, where we have a certain measurable number and goals of products that we need to achieve by the end. And this will be tracked regularly. And also, the money and the funding will not just go out like this. All these organizations need to give us back all the information and achievements that they've done, and then the funding will go, quarterly. So you just don't get the money like that. You only get the money if you do also the work. Yeah. And then for the AU's perspective, I think it comes also in the impact because currently most of these organizations work locally in their own environment, and through the upscaling and funding methods, we want to make it as regional as possible, so as Pan-African as possible for the future.
Thank you so much. This is to test that we are still awake. So I'll go right there, because I think she had a question or comment on impact. Then we can proceed, right? No.
It's actually a comment. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eva Skanyesije, and I work with the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, CSBAG, and based in Uganda. Actually, mine is sharing an experience in relation to success of some of using technology. We actually have a project that is being funded by GIZ in Uganda, and we are using an application to collect issues on service delivery and citizens are able to collect those issues and provide feedback through that application to Office of the Auditor General. And we are implementing this, trying it in 20 districts, and we are actually seeing results and feedback. One, there is real-time information because the application is able to give evidence, video, photos, anything, and Office of the Auditor General is able to receive that information in real time, and they're able to actually also respond immediately where it is applicable. So really, civic technology is the way to go, and it's actually really working. That's from my experience.
Thank you so much. It's been working. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I just wanted to ask you a question. In a situation like that, how are you managing inclusion or inclusive use of such an app in a continent where you have maybe people whose digital skills are not that good, situations where you may have, terrible internet connections, persons with disabilities who may need special features to interact with such a tool. We want to know, I'm not pinning you, just want to hear from your experience, yeah?
Actually, how it has been a trial. That's why it's actually in just 20 districts, and we started by selecting a few individuals actually who are literate, like they can easily understand how to use the application, and we trained them on how to use that kind of application so that they can go to the grassroots and also pass on that same knowledge of how to use the application. For the bit of internet, honestly, some of the challenge that we are still facing, because internet accessibility is really still a challenge even when you go to some of those local areas.
We forgot the applause. Don't worry, we get done in about 25 minutes. Thank you so much. And the reason I brought that up is that as we pursue inclusive civic tech, then we make it more attractive. And I know a lot of people are now pursuing a lot of offline features in addition to fully online features. I know people who are pursuing digital accessibility, especially for persons with disabilities. So I think making civic tech inclusive makes it more attractive and possibly attracts more funding, more partnerships, which I think is good. You had your hand up? Yeah, so 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Moses. I'm Angolan. So I would like to thank for the opportunity that was given to be here. So we're working about the sexual reproductive health of young women in Angola country. So, but we learn more about the digital right in our province. So now I have one question. What can we do to improve our digital rights in our country? Because in my country it's so difficult to have internet and other way to share, to source and to use other applicative in the internet. So now I would like it to other organization can to improve the project in our country, because it's very a girl in my country, they have no possibility to one laptop, to a cell phone, to increase your digital right about it. And then, so what can I do to create a project in my community to teaching other girl about the digital right?
Thank you so much. I think there's a question, right? If my ears didn't lie to me, write it down. You're going to respond after the other one. We forgot our applause. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Thank you so much. Who was it? Who was it?
I appreciate your project. Now we saw your project, your action. We are very happy for that. And we are interested, we are very interested. We want, how can we get such experience also? Internet experience to also progress. We need it. We need to be empowered. We want to move on. Not easy for us, but how can I do to get that such of empowerment? It's our first time to take part of that kind of meeting. And we want to progress, so how can I do to get some empowerment?
She takes you along with her. Like, you can't even sleep. I wish everyone here was communicating sign language. So you've picked her question, because I'm going to hand over to you after one more person. Who was it?
Thank you very much. And I'm happy really to be here because obviously, my name is Florence Nakazibwe. I'm a lawyer, work with the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, ICNL. I'm happy to hear the conversation here because most of the panels we are hearing are about, depressing developments. But I think this has been a more sort of empowering, progressive discussion. And because of what I'm used to hearing, I guess now I want to also hear your experience. What have been the feedback you've got in terms of addressing the risk factors for civic tech? It is good to have platforms that allow for exchange between citizens and governments, those in leadership, until they become a threat. When they're exposing stories of corruption and things like that, they become easy targets. And that's where now us who work in civic space then come in to help. Have you had aspects dealing with resilience or any feedback within your, because I haven't had anything in that regard. What has been the experience of your project?
Okay, and now? Okay, thank you. I have lost my trail of thought. I have the mind of a goldfish. Okay, yes, it is great until it's not. So at Ushahidi, what we are trying to help our grantees with is to teach them aspects of data handling, because first, remember, they're collecting very sensitive data. I mean, citizens are offering, for example, if you're reporting on a gender-based violence incident, you could feel scared to report that. You could feel that you could be exposed. So we're teaching them aspects of data management, how to collect data safely, how to store data safely, how to anonymize data safely, and how to share data safely. I think from a technological perspective, we are trying to help them be safe so that their target communities can feel open and comfortable enough to give their data. In terms of what happens when the government now comes for you, even us, we are still trying to figure out the answer to that. So I don't have the answer to that yet, but thank you for sharing that, and perhaps that's something we need to talk about. We could probably add it to our curriculum. To your question on how to promote digital rights, there's something Mohammed said earlier, offline. Even as technology is progressing and using the internet more and more, people seem to forget there are offline solutions that still exist. We still have radio, community radio. I don't know how it is in Angola, but for us in Kenya, community radios are a big thing. People love calling into the radio and hearing their own voices and providing feedback. So community radio is something you should consider for reaching the girls and the women at scale. Secondly, we have SMS and USSD. These are two aspects that do not need to use the internet. If you have an SMS shortcode, for example, *12, a shortcode like 2134, and then when a young lady sends a message to this shortcode, then they can be able to receive information concerning their sexual rights and how to report in case their rights are violated, or USSD. So offline is always a good to internet, and yeah, community radio. So offline, I think, is a good place to start. Even as people are progressing with the internet, let's not leave those who don't have access to internet. Yeah.
There was a previous question earlier that I just wanted to speak to, which was around how do we create streams of revenue to sustain civic tech initiatives, organizations, and I just wanted to offer a resource that we have at CTIN, which is essentially the product of a lot of research based on the experiences and insights of a lot of civic tech organizations, but also it's been developed by a lawyer who's very much aware of the frameworks, the legal frameworks, and how to go about navigating this system of finance, and especially in the context of global organizations. So there's different types of funders and organizations who are out there who are interested in funding civic tech, and this resource essentially allows you to understand what you're getting yourself into when you choose to align yourself with certain kinds of organizations. So I can share the link with you. It's on our website. It's civictech.africa.funding. But I'll just have to check that with you. I'll have a look. But essentially, this is a resource toolkit that we're actually using to inform some of the training that we're doing with the grantees currently. Is to say that there is this research that's already been done, and it's a handbook that can allow you to know how to navigate and play the field, but also to understand how to position yourself in order to receive the right kind of funding for the work that you're doing.
The question on inclusion, but first of all, also I wanted to add on what Rhoda said regarding risks, because so all these organizations, their focuses needs to be in alignment to the AU's digital transformation strategy, which are basically development goals like, you know, creating more jobs, limiting the digital gap, and growth in economy, and so on and so forth. So these are frameworks that all AU member states agreed on. So you're basically only holding them accountable to things that were policies that the government promised themselves. So they cannot actually go against something that they said themselves in reality. And I think for our organizations, the lucky, of course, situation is that they're backed up by the AU. So the risk factor is very limited when it comes to us, luckily. And regarding how you can be part of it, I think this is a two-part. Either you want to be part of the Civic Tech Fund in general, was the question, or the initiatives that were done. So if we're lucky and everything goes well, then of course maybe the next cohort next year, now you know about it, now you can also market it in your environments and then apply for it. But secondly, of course, all these capacity building initiatives for all these organizations are for them to then distribute them in their own communities and in their own environments. So you can just look up all these organizations. They're all on our social media pages, the AU's channels, and we had 15 this year, and I think almost about the same amount last year. So you have almost 13 organizations in pretty much over 25 countries in Africa, where maybe one of yours is your own country, and just look it up, and you can be part.
Okay, we forgot applause. And, see, we're listening at, all these questions and input. I also realize it resonates a lot with our research findings, for example. So maybe there's a guy over there who wanted to say one thing, then I can hand over to Siwe to share a bit of our findings from research, and then you can take the conversation back over to you. We have about 20 minutes left. I didn't see time running that fast, but we shall manage.
D'abord, vraiment, son exposé en impliquant, lui, il a déjà commencé à impliquer d'abord les sourds, vraiment donc dans son exposé. Ça aussi, vraiment bravo, je voulais vraiment que tout le monde l'applaudisse, Mohamed. Et ensuite, dire à Mohamed qu'avant, les sourds aussi avaient des difficultés vraiment donc pour se réunir. Mais je pense aussi grâce à cette technologie-là, ils commencent maintenant donc à se réunir et à partager des informations. Donc, je me suis dit que la technologie vraiment est bienvenue pour la communauté sourde. Et vraiment, je pense que c'est à encourager. Voilà, pour qu'au moins que les informations, pour qu'ils puissent donc avoir encore beaucoup plus d'informations, quoi. En tout cas, merci beaucoup. Bon, je voulais remercier quelqu'un, mais il n'a pas voulu que je dise son nom, mais c'est pas grave.
Okay, I can tell from the reactions here that he said a lot of good stuff about me, but I forgot my ears here, so I didn't get to hear any of it. Rhoda, can you summarize for me in one sentence the good stuff they said about me? Don't say the bad one.
It was in French. Even I need translation.
It was in French?
Yeah.
Wow. Who knows French here? Who knows French here? Can you translate for me? What did he say about me? Nothing. You know French? Because I can't miss the good energy.
Okay. So basically, he was saying that he was thanking Mohamed for talking about or including deaf people living with deaf disability in his presentation and in his moderation since the beginning. And he was also saying that it's a great thing that we are using technology and we are promoting technology because it enables deaf people to come together as a community and share information as a community, but also have access to information through technology. So yes, he was saying good thing about you.
Wow. I'm not usually emotional, but I was about to cry. So in the interest of time, Hello. Okay, in the interest of time, I'll hand over to Siwe to quickly take us through our research findings. And if we have a few more minutes, then we can go back to the audience.
Thanks, Mo. So, as part of the work, as I mentioned earlier, we've committed to doing 4 research outputs essentially as part of this one-year program. And one of the research at the moment was understanding the civic tech ecosystem. So what we have done is using essentially a mixed method approach of combining the 240 civic tech case studies that we have with some research interviews with the grantees and also just some desktop information of the work that we've been doing in this area. And what you'll see on the left-hand side is what I mentioned a bit earlier is that a lot of the civic technologies that we are currently seeing are predominantly in the area of governance and democracy. There's a lot of the civic technologies around watchdogs and seeing what's happening in government, how are they spending our monies and those kinds of things. But what we've seen after the COVID-19 pandemic is a rise of technologies that are looking at more tangible solutions that can support people on the ground. So we've seen a lot of civic technologies emerging in the space of climate action, service delivery, gender-based violence, mobile health services, education technologies that Rhoda was speaking about earlier, and even going to the area of agri-tech. So on the right-hand side, we've just compared in terms of the applications that we've received, what are some of the emerging civic technology sectors that we are seeing. And as you can see there's a lot coming up around the education space and seeing more the emergence of the agricultural sector and how we can use that to enhance essentially the productivity, but also access and improving food security in different areas across the continent. So as part of the research, as I mentioned earlier, our colleague here, our civic tech innovator, mentioned the big stumbling block, which is funding. But there's also various factors that are affecting the success or the viability of civic tech adaptation. And this includes anything ranging from geographical issues, political issues, and the various social and cultural contexts that are starting to impact the level of adaptation of civic technology. So competition is one of the biggest recurring challenges within the civic tech space. And because there's a limited and often uneven distribution of these funding mechanisms, that becomes a threat to the sustainability of civic technologies. And this also speaks to the fact that we need stakeholder buy-in, we need partnerships to begin sustaining and supporting these civic technologies, whether it's from the private sector, government, or even with the knowledge sectors. We're seeing a lot of universities that are supporting these kinds of innovations, and especially the research. CTIN itself is based within a university. So one of the grantees was just mentioning that this competition leads to a lot of us, as Yvonne mentioned, a lot of us are doing the same thing, and this also creates unnecessary competition within the ecosystem. So it becomes a competitive market where we are competing instead of collaborating, which is really the direction that we should be moving towards. And this often, becomes another stumbling block because there needs to be more of a focus on developing sustainable funding models, as I was sharing earlier, in terms of the resources that we're having, to ensure that there are different approaches to funding civic technology. So we need to get creative in terms of how we mobilize resources to ensure the sustainability of civic tech. But then if you're looking at the space of civic technology, a lot of the grantees that we are working with just across the continent overall are finding that they are working in a space where governments often don't understand what they are doing, or there's the perception that they are being antagonistic to what the government is doing. So we're calling out what's happening, and this creates a lot of friction within the ecosystem. But even where there is a willingness within the local government or national, regional government space, even when there is a willingness, there isn't really a mechanism that allows civic tech to be able to participate or engage with local governments. Oftentimes, our grantees are working from the ground up. They have to advocate, make themselves known, and put themselves in a position where they collaborate with governments and prove their value in the system. So this is another huge learning for us that we are picking up in terms of the advocacy side. How do we start ensuring that we advocate for policies that create a space for civic technologies, because these are the organizations and innovators that are bridging the gap between communities and their governments and trying to create a more open and productive relationship. So that's one of the stumbling blocks, is that there's a lot of fear and apprehension around the adoption of civic tech. But there's also obviously the pushback from governments, as I mentioned, and this also relates to the fact that Engaging positively with government authorities can obviously help civic tech initiatives to gain the support that they need and scale their impact, which is very important. But also we are looking to influence policy changes, which was one of the requirements. The possibility or regional level, what are you tenants? But navigating this relationship requires us to be very careful about how we go about it, especially where we are operating in regions where governments may be resistant to such technologies. For instance, there's projects that are focused on improving services or fighting corruption. They need to balance the collaboration with advocacy. So we need to collaborate first with your government so that you can prove kind of your value within the system and show that you want to help them to achieve the goals that they've already set out. Because this is also another thing that we want to clarify, is that these innovators and the governments that they are working with are very much aligned in terms of the outcomes they want to achieve. It's just the way that they are going about it is quite different and innovative to what the governments are usually used to. So we are just promoting that element of thinking in a collaborative mindset rather than being antagonistic, which is what we are finding in the space. So as part of the other, what is coming up from the research is looking at the digital infrastructure. The project from Angola, he was speaking about how we ensure access to these technologies. And oftentimes we know that it relies on digital infrastructure and technology. And in as much as we can use these USSD codes and these offline mechanisms of community radio and the like, many communities are still in rural areas and really do not have the basic infrastructure to allow them to participate. So this is another advocacy area that we are wanting to raise through these grantees, through the research, through this experience, and raise them to the level of the GIZ African Union to say, you have access to these governments. They convene the heads of states of these African countries, and we want to bring the research and the knowledge and experiences of young people who are advancing and practicing and putting, basically the young people who are already achieving what the governments are setting out to do. We want to raise the work that they are doing to the level of the regional bodies that can begin to influence now the local and national bodies. So this is a very big chunk of work that we set out for ourselves, but it's also a very valid and important space to engage in, especially if we want to see the sustainability of the civic tech innovators that we're having. So the role of government agencies then needs to play a part in opening up their data sets, as Rhoda was mentioning the project from Tunisia. So in terms of this area, it's oftentimes quite difficult for these innovators to get access to these data sets, and they're often not really well organized in a way that they can analyze to give insights and start having an impact. But it shows that one of the grantees from Kenya says that because of the way that we're seeing a difference between those countries and regions who have a more advanced presence of civic technologies like West Africa and Southern Africa, but oftentimes we are seeing that in Central Africa, for example, some of the grantees described it as it's still embryonic, it's still at really the conception phase, and we're still trying to figure out how can we promote the learnings from the different regions so that they can boost each other up and ensure that they don't have to go over the same stumbling blocks that they've gone over. So the example of Idarity in Tunisia is illustrating that building strategic partnerships through the open government partnership, which is a global movement, you can begin to use open data and open government approaches. So partnering with a global organization such as OGP allowed them to build credibility at the national level, which is also some of the so that you can establish these very critical partnerships. Just to speak quickly around the SWOT analysis that we have done around the research space, the strength that we want to highlight is that there is a diversity of tools and approaches, and essentially that these are supported by community-based organizations and research organizations. But when we're looking at the opportunities, there is a huge opportunities and space for collaboration within the ecosystem, but also to develop partnerships that demonstrate the value of civic tech to governments and stakeholders. But speaking to the threats that were mentioned a bit earlier, it is sustainable financing, which we have shared the platform and the tool funding.civictech.africa, where you can access how you can navigate the space of funding within civic tech. But also it's important to look at the monitoring and evaluation of civic tech projects because of the funding mechanism, which is very much grant-based, is what we are seeing in the ecosystem at the moment. We need to start looking at evaluating and ensuring that we create the environment that can enable these civic tech innovators to thrive. So the success of the sector really rests on the ability of the actors to pivot and adapt to the different changes that are happening within the ecosystem. So I won't dwell on the weaknesses, but I just want to highlight one, which is around the language barriers that affect the rate of civic tech adaptation, but also the ability for us to learn between the different regions. I'm very glad that we have French translation in this session, but because of the way that civic, or just in general, communication across the continent, we have predominantly Francophone and Anglophone speaking countries, and because of this language barrier, we can't even learn from one another to say, what are you doing in Tunisia that can help others in Zimbabwe, for example. So there's those areas that we also found very important to include in this project. So as part of the capacity building program, we also ensure that there is translation, so there isn't that barrier, and that we can facilitate the communication and learning between the grantees. So yeah, I'll end it there, and hopefully we can also have a minute or two for discussion. Mohammed?
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is already 5 minutes after our time, so I'm thinking we could actually close. But of course, these are our email addresses. You can always reach out, and we have conversations on this topic. I want to thank you so much for being an active audience. I want to thank you so much for being an inclusive audience. But before I even say the last words, someone lost their bank card, and this is their name, Aminti Emildu Don. Hope I didn't pronounce it bad. If that is you, or you know someone who goes by those names, that lady over there has his bank card. Aminti Emildu Don. Okay, thank you so much. Do you guys have any closing words, or we close? Perfect. Let's all stand up and do a huge, huge, huge round of applause for the sign language interpreters. Who are those guys? It's really, really tiresome. Please go to the front and people see you. All the interpreters. It is draining mentally, physically. So these guys deserve a huge thank you so much. Let's keep the conversations going. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a good night. Has lost their room card, Radisson M6. If that is you, please speak it. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it with that lady. Maybe it was from the previous sessions.